we're going to look at criminal proceedings. So we're going to look at criminal justice and how the justice system works when people have been accused of crimes. The very, very simple way to kind of remember the criminal justice proceedings is this little like mnemonic to help you out. A, hat, very small. So all the capital letters stand for something in the criminal justice system. And this is a very simplified version of it. But the first thing that's going to happen, after the crime has occurred, is an arrest is going to happen. So the suspect is going to be arrested. Now that they were arrested, they're now going to be known as the defendant. Okay. Now that that's happened, the defendant, the suspect, is going to have a hearing, and they're going to hear the charges against them. Now, if this doesn't occur, we're going to have a grand jury, and that's going to be something different. A grand jury is going to look at evidence to determine whether they should go to that trial stage, okay? Now, if someone has a grand jury, they haven't been arrested yet, they haven't been charged with anything, that's where the grand jury comes in and they do that, okay? So some stuff's a little bit different, but that's why I said this is simplified. Here's what happens. So an arrest has occurred, a hearing has occurred, and then the arraignment occurs. So the hearing and the arraignment is you're in the courthouse. At the arraignment, you are going to enter your plea. And there are a couple pleas you can enter in our criminal system. So guilty, no contest, or not guilty. And so we'll look at that, what it means. But an arraignment is literally that. You are arranging whether you're going forward with a trial or not. If the person enters guilty, they're going to skip the trial. They go directly to the verdict and then sentencing because they're saying they admitted that they're guilty of it. Same thing with like no contest. It'll be the same thing. It'll be treated like a guilty even though you're not admitting that you are or that you're innocent. It gets treated like a guilty. Once someone has had an arraignment, they've entered their plea. If they have entered not guilty, they're going to go forward with a trial. Trial is where like all the evidence presentation is going to happen. The state, the government has to prove beyond reasonable doubt that the defendant did indeed do this crime. That's what they got to prove. Now, once the trial has concluded, we're going to go to the verdict. The verdict is guilty, not guilty. Sometimes juries don't come back with a verdict of guilty or not guilty, and that's okay. It's going to be called a hung jury, and we're going to look at that. But 100% of the jurors have to agree that the person is guilty or not guilty. If you are found not guilty, it's called acquitted, or you are found innocent. Once the verdict has happened, we go to the sentencing. In the sentencing phase, and it's only those that were found guilty, they're going to have their punishment given to them. So this is a very simplified, very small version of a criminal justice proceedings. So to start any criminal justice proceeding, a crime has got to occur. So a person has broken the law. They have to break the law in order for there to be a crime. So remember, part of federalism, that principle of our Constitution, is about law enforcement. The state, local, and federal government all enforce the law. So you have local laws like City of Fayetteville laws, Cumberland County laws. You have state laws, North Carolina laws, and then you have federal government laws. Wherever the crime occurred is where the trial is pretty much going to happen. Now, there are exceptions that get made to that, but for the most part, that is so that that area gets justice. So sometimes people, particularly wealthy people, are cases that are very infamous, like everybody knows about the case. A case might be moved to a different county, but those are very rare, but it can happen. So sometimes with like celebrities, because of who they are and because of them living in a community, they might have too much prestige in the community, good or bad. either way. So they might move a trial to another area. But most of the time, your trial is going to be wherever the crime occurred. So if you broke a city of Fayetteville law or you broke a state of North Carolina law here, it would occur in Cumberland County Courthouse. If you broke a United States government law, well, that's going to be in the United States District Court. So remember when we looked at federal court structure and state court structure, that's what we're talking about here. Crimes can either be a misdemeanor or felony. So a misdemeanor is a less serious crime. And things like that would be like speeding. You were going 45 in a 35 zone. That's speeding. When the cop pulls you after they did their radar gun on you, they wrote you a ticket. The ticket has a fine attached to it, and that is going to be your punishment. Same thing with like a parking ticket, a fine. They're trying to discourage you from doing it again. So if you ever got a speeding ticket and the punishment was $350, $350 every time you speed, people are going to think about it again. The point of punishment is to deter you from doing it again. So they're trying to prevent you from speeding again. Or they're trying to prevent you from parking in that spot illegally again, like in a handicap spot. The fines are pretty high. So they're trying to stop you from doing it again. Same thing with like jaywalking. Jaywalking is when you cross the street illegally. Like if there is a crosswalk, you are to use it. You're not just supposed to cross anywhere you want. And you can get a ticket for that. We also do community service a lot of times for misdemeanors. So community service is giving hours back to the community in which you harmed. House arrest and probation are also common punishments. You're only allowed to go to your workplace and like to a grocery store. You have to be at home at certain hours, and and it just depends. Like it can be way worse than that. Like they really can't leave the house, but they always have a GPS tracker, ankle bracelet on them. They have a officer that checks in on them constantly. They could have drug tests done on them too. So it just depends. It just depends on the crime. But probation house arrest rules are very exact, and they are going to make certain that you understand them before they let you out. And that is your punishment. You're just serving your punishment out in the community instead of in a jail. Jails are run by your county. So the sheriff's department runs the jails, and people can go to jail for up to a year, and so that would be a misdemeanor. Okay, so Cumberland County Courthouse is always regulated and controlled by the sheriff's department because it's county, and county lockup is run by the sheriff's department too. Okay, so county lockup is the jail. Felonies are serious crimes. And a serious crime would be things like rape, kidnapping, drug dealing, drug possession with intent to sell. It just depends on what the charges are going to be. Amounts, you name it, okay? So in a felony case, you can also do community service. They do look at prior sometimes, like how many times have you been arrested for stuff like this? Do you have a clean criminal record? Things like that. They look at, possibility of house arrest and probation for people as well, sometimes when it comes to felonies. Sometimes people who have felony charges and convictions will get prison time, and that means they get more than a year behind bars. And prisons are always run by the state government, or they can be run by the federal government. It just depends. So if it was a federal crime you did, well, it's federal prison. If it's a state thing, it'd be the state of North Carolina running the prison system. And they do. The state runs the prison system. They are watched and regulated by the federal government. And, we've talked about that in class. Like the federal government does regulate states and the prison systems because, remember, in the U.S. Constitution, there is no cruel or unusual punishment. We don't allow it. It's part of that 8th Amendment. So when the federal government gets wind of prisons in states being real run down, unsafe for prisoners, the water is contaminated, there's a high rate of prisoners who are dying inside the prison, the federal government does step in and they make certain that states get back up the code, or they take over the prison system. And you've recently seen them threatening to do that. So convicted felons are supposed to be treated decently. And, we'll look more at like the punishment part a little bit later, but just to kind of give you a heads up on what goes on. In an arrest, the police will arrest the suspect. So cops are going to arrest. People can turn themselves in. People do. People turn themselves in all the time. But whenever someone is arrested, they're handcuffed, they're booked, okay? But they're always read their Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Right there, they're informing you of your Fifth Amendment right, the right of no self-incrimination. You don't have to tattletale on yourself, man. You don't have to say anything. But if you do, they are going to use that against you. They also tell you that you have the right to an attorney. If you can't provide one will be provided for you. So now they're telling you about your Sixth Amendment as well. So we talked about Miranda versus Arizona, which gave us the Miranda rights. We talked about Gideon versus Wainwright that ensured that we do get the Sixth Amendment rights when it comes to felonies. When someone is arrested, they're going to get booked, so they're going to get fingerprinted and their photo taken, and our fingerprints are unique to us. So they go ahead, they take them. They keep them along with your mugshot. It's on record. And mugshots are published. They're all a part of public record. Okay? But we don't do it for juvenile offenders. So anyone that is considered a child and they're going to charge them as a child, they do not do this kind of stuff because we keep all this stuff private. People do stupid things when they're young and they choose not to allow that to affect them later. When you're 12, 13 years old, it's real easy for someone to say, hey, let's go do this. You do it, you get in trouble. But that doesn't mean that at 30, you're still that kid and that you're still doing those things. So we try not to let it affect us or affect children later. So the criminal system kind of looks at young children differently than they would an adult. Your brain and all that stuff's a little bit different. So when police officers arrest, there are a couple ways they could do it. You get caught in the act, and the cops do catch people in the act. You have silent alarms on a lot of businesses. So when the alarm is going off, it alerts the police officers or the police department right away. You have people who are watching. You got neighborhood watches and stuff. But you also have arrest warrants. When an arrest warrant is issued, a judge will issue it. And so the judge issues an arrest warrant stating, yeah, you can go ahead and bring in the person. But it means that the prosecutor, the person who represents our state, the state lawyer in this case, is ready to go forward kind of with a trial. And it doesn't mean that they have everything 100% locked down and perfect, but they are pretty ready to go forward with a trial. When an arrest warrant is issued, remember, judges don't issue it just because. There has to be real reasons. So when the prosecutors are saying, the police department is saying, we really feel like this person should be arrested for this, they've got to prove it to the judge. They are not allowed to hold you just to hold you. Remember that. People also turn themselves in too, and a lot of times people will be advised by a lawyer to turn themselves in. So when you turn yourself in, that is noted. It is on record that you willingly turned yourself in. They're going to again read you your Miranda rights. They're going to let you know your rights, but sometimes that is viewed more favorably, and so we have seen people turn themselves in. When an arrest warrant was issued for Michael Jackson, he turned himself in, and that was noted in records that he willingly came in and turned himself in. They look at it as you cooperating with the law and cooperating with the proceedings. It doesn't mean you're guilty. It just means you are a citizen who is willing to cooperate with the police. You're willing to help them out to get this matter resolved.